The U.S. Congress demands accounting of all economic military aid to Ukraine. Notice confirms what promises to be the most comprehensive audit of the war effort to date. Philip Wegman, Real Clearwire and WND reports, as President Biden boarded a European train destined for Kiev back in Washington, Representative James Comer and his team drafted a long-expected letter. Standing next to Ukrainian President Zelensky, Biden pledged Monday that the lifeline of economic and military aid to that nation's support, already well in excess of $100 billion, would not slack, and that the United States would stand with Ukraine as long as it takes, quote-unquote. Comer, the new chair of the House Oversight Committee, delivered a different message to the Biden administration Wednesday. He said, "Save your receipts, all of them. The committee is calling on the administration to turn over all documents and internal communications regarding any economic assistance programs for the Ukrainian government, and to turn over similar material regarding any anti-corruption efforts as they relate to both financial and military aid." The notice comes on the eve of 1-year anniversary of the Russian operation in Ukraine. The letter announces the beginning of what promises to be the most comprehensive audit of the war effort to date. It was first obtained first and exclusively by Real Clear Politics, providing security and humanitarian assistance for warfighting and reconstruction purposes comes with an inherent risk of fraud, waste, and abuse, Comer wrote, before insisting that the U.S. must develop oversight mechanisms to mitigate risks made worse by mandates to spend money quickly. House Republicans are casting a wide net. The committee wants a comprehensive account of strategies for end-use, monitoring for weapons, equipment, direct budgeting assistance, and any other form of economic or security assistance for the Ukrainian people. They are also calling for all materials related to how much federal money has been spent thus far and how much remains in the spending pipeline. Comer furthermore wants to know and calls on the administration to disclose material related to any benchmarks for success of aid programs as well as any conditions imposed on funds providing the assistance to Ukraine. The letter was addressed to Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, and Administrator Samantha Powers of the U.S. Agency for International Development. The White House knew it was coming, of course. Speaker Kevin McCarthy said ahead of the midterms that a Republican House would not write a blank check, quote-unquote, to Ukraine, and it was only a matter of time before the GOP made good on that oversight promise. There are reasons for concern. While Zelensky rose to power on an anti-corruption platform, the former Eastern Bloc country has a history of struggling with government fraud and graft. They regularly rank towards the bottom of international corruption indexes and a track record that has even ardent supporters of the defensive war worried. When Senator Angus King traveled to Ukraine last month, the independent from Maine told RCP he warned Zelensky that misappropriation of funds or misplaced guns could undermine support in the West. He said, "I said a scandal would really screw this up." The message was well received. According to King, he got it immediately, but verbal assurances are not enough to assure Republican concerns. And according to the Joint Strategic Oversight Plan for Ukraine response, the administration struggled to account exactly for all the billions spent. The Pentagon Inspector General, for instance, warned that the department was unable to provide end-use monitoring in accordance to the DoD policy. Well, in other words, they can't account for all these funds. One of the specific areas Comer is demanding answers on, the policy requires tracking the serial numbers of weapons and ammunition, as USA Today and others previously noted, to ensure they are used as intended. Congress has appropriated $113 billion in economic and security aid to Ukraine since Russian tanks rolled across the border. Over the course of 2 decades, by comparison, the U.S. spent $146 billion to send military humanitarian aid to Afghanistan. The administration insisted that they take corruption seriously and have taken steps to guard against it from the beginning of the conflict. They just have not seen any malfeasance thus far, according to John Kirby, who said last month that neither military nor financial assistance have fallen prey to any kind of corruption in Ukraine. Correct, Biden's national security spokesman replied without qualification when RCP asked him to confirm that the administration had not yet identified any previous misuse of equipment or misappropriation of funds from the U.S. The Oversight Committee highlighted that exchange in light of reports that Zelensky had fired several senior officers who were allegedly engaged in bribery and misuse of public funds. Based on Kirby's remarks, Comer wrote in the letter, the U.S. National Security Council appears aware of this corruption scandal, heightening concerns that the U.S. agencies are not conducting oversight of taxpayer assistance to Ukraine. But responding to those reports directly, Kirby told reporters that the firing of senior Ukrainian officials demonstrated how Zelensky and the U.S. shares concern over corruption allegations, and it's apparent that he takes it seriously. Victoria Nuland, Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, later echoed that sentiment, telling the State Foreign Relations Committee that the staffing changes in Kiev sent a very strong signal to others who would try to rip off this war effort. If Comer received the signal from afar, he doesn't see anything reassuring in it. The chairman wrote that agencies must work overtime to ensure the U.S. taxpayer dollars spent in Ukraine are used, quote, for their intended purposes to prevent and reduce the risk of waste, fraud, and abuse, end quote. The Kentucky Republicans calling the administration to detail information related to any anti-corruption effort going back to February 24 last year, the date of the Russian operation. His committee expects those materials as soon as possible, but they have given the administration a 2-week deadline. The Oversight Committee expects information no later than March 8, 2023. So in about 10 days we'll know. A senior administration official told RCP January that Biden believes oversight is critical and that the administration takes very seriously our responsibility to work with Ukraine government to ensure appropriate safeguards are in place so that U.S.-funded assistance reaches those for whom it is intended. The official reiterated that they have not seen credible evidence of U.S. military aid being used anywhere but the battlefield, and pointed RCP to the whole of government plan to prevent and counter illicit diversion of weapons and military equipment. The plan was released by the State Department last October, 8 months after the conflict began, and well after Congress appropriated tens of billions of dollars in aid to Ukraine. They noted that economic assistance is administered by the World Bank. The administration contracts with the national consulting firm Deloitte as a third-party monitor to review financial controls and procedures utilized by the government of Ukraine to track and oversee the U.S. funds. U.S. aid administrators humanitarian assistance, and according to the official, that agency has internal safeguards to counter fraud while also employing an unnamed third-party contractor to monitor the funds. Republicans say those steps are vague and cold comfort at best in light of the last 2 decades of prior experience, and when it comes to World Bank and NGOs, they're calling for all material related to how multilateral organizations are employed and want any information regarding any oversight mechanisms. Conservatives have always been wary of massive government spending. Nothing changes, Comer said. With any massive government spending comes the opportunity for waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement, and he said Ukraine aid is no different. While the White House gives Ukraine high marks for steps that they've taken to root out malfeasance, they insist they are on the lookout. After all, Kirby told reporters last month, corruption remains an ever-present danger in all conflicts. You can't forget that, he said. I mean, it's a war. So this is originally from Real Clear Politics on WND. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box